Hello guys, and welcome back to our channel. Now in today's video, we'll be taking a deep look into a powerful reflection on racism, history, and the current state of affairs, especially in light of recent events. Now, many of you may remember the video I posted a few days back where Trump suggested that the military would no longer hire black individuals. Well, the second clip we are focusing on today brings even more context to that statement. In this clip, a palm color man explains how America's history has been shaped by rich palm color men creating divisions, telling poor palm color people to view black and brown people as their enemies. Now, I remember posting this video some time back, and I thought of bringing this video to light again because it relates to what is currently happening with the Trump administration. Now, this idea of palm-coloredness being created is a thought-provoking perspective, and it ties directly into what we're witnessing today. As we analyze this clip, you will begin to see how it aligns with the events unfolding in the Trump administration and why, in some ways, I think what he said about the military not recruiting black people is actually a blessing in disguise. We will talk about the first and third clip later, but I want us to focus really on the second clip. So make sure to watch these videos until the very end. So with that said, let's take a look at these videos. I will be right back.
I did not know that was as bad as it was still. Like, I know it's bad. Okay, don't come for me when I say that, but I did not know it was this bad, and I've never seen it this bad in front of my own eyes than I did this morning at 3 a.m. My son had a migraine last night, and no store was open, and I had to go to the one gas station down the street. I was let in gladly. I was the only one that even was there at that time. I was let in. Was looking for my stuff. About a minute later, a black man walks in, and he goes to pay for his smokes, and the cash register guy says, "We're closed." And I didn't really understand what was going on until I got my stuff towards the front of the line. And the black man turns to me and he goes, "Did you know that he said it was closed?" And the register guy says that I'm not serving him, I'll serve you. No, dude, you lost my service. So I walked out with the black man. But that's not the point. The point is how disgusting I was feeling for this man, simply because he was, I don't know what he was getting there. He could have been getting, it's the same thing I was getting, medicine for his child, but he couldn't. And that's what's sick. And even if if he loses my service, he still has thousands of other people that are gonna still allow his services to go on. I'm just gonna call you out on social media because I think that that's the best thing to do. The man who worked graveyard at the Rocket gas station and convenience store on First Avenue in Federal Way, Washington, you've lost my service. I will never, ever go back to your store. I'll never give you a single penny if it was the last penny I ever had. And I hope that people who watch this do the same, because that was disgusting behavior. Very much.
History of America is the history of rich white men telling not rich white people that their enemies are black and brown. It starts in the colonies of what would become the United States. Let's remember, during the colonial period, mid-1600s, there was no such thing as white people. I know some people who are now called white find that shocking, right? Because they think whiteness is real, right? But whiteness was created. Europeans didn't call themselves white. We didn't call ourselves white. We weren't all members of one big happy family. Are you kidding? Have you studied the history of Europe? The history of Europe was about each other. That's what we did in Europe. Before we figured out there were other people, right? I mean, that was the history of Europe. The English hated the Irish, right? Northern Italians didn't even think that Southern Italians were Italians. The Germans hated everybody, and everybody hated back, right? There was no team called white, no race called white, but all of a sudden, in the middle of the 1600s, there was. Why? Why was it suddenly necessary to create this thing called the white race? Well, because rich people can count, that's why. And so rich folks looked around, the ones that owned all the land, you know, in the colonies, the colonial elite looked around and they realized something, that they were heavily outnumbered by African enslaved folks, by European indentured servants who were just one level above a slave, or other Europeans who weren't technically indentured servants, but they were still peasants, didn't have any money, didn't have any land, and they could do the math. They added it up and they were like, damn, we got to figure out a way to split these folks apart from one another or they're going to rise up and take our stuff, right? Because after a while, these black folks who were enslaved Africans and these quote-unquote white folks who were poor Europeans are going to figure out they're all getting played by these rich people, right? So ultimately, the rich figure out they got to come up with some way to get somebody in that group on their team. The easiest thing is to get the poor Europeans, right? Because at least they look like you. They sort of share some of the customs and the culture. So they all of a sudden create this thing called whiteness, and they say, now you're part of the club. Now we're going to let you testify in court, enter into contracts, vote, at least if you're a man, own a little bit of land, at least if you're a man, right? And we're going to get rid of indentured servitude. No more of that, because you're too good for that. And we're going to take the white men, now called white men, and put them on the slave patrol to keep black people in line. Give them a horse and a badge and make them feel big and powerful, right? They're still poor. They still don't have anything. They didn't pay the slave patrol well, right? Just exploited them, used them as a buffer between the elite and the other poor folks, particularly poor folks of color. And pretty soon the rebellions that occasionally happened where black and white got together to overthrow the elite, those stopped because the divide and conquer had begun to work, right? You could turn people against each other by telling those poor white folks, they got to keep these black people in line. And so that divide and conquer gets initiated in the colonies. Rich white men telling not rich white people that their enemies are black and brown. Fast forward to the Civil War era. And you have, I'm from the South, right? My people, the elite in my part of the country, right, actually announced that the reason they wanted to break away from the Union and possibly go to war with their brothers and sisters to the North was in order to maintain slavery. And we said that at the time. We lie about it now. And we say it had nothing to do with that. But of course, at the time, they didn't have any shame about it, so they just said it openly, right? The vice president of the Confederacy, Alexander Stephens, said that the cornerstone of the new government was the great truth that it's not the equal of the white man. So that's the reason the Confederacy was formed and existed. But here's the trick. If I'm rich and I want to go to war to protect my ownership in other human beings, my property, but you're poor and you don't own any enslaved people, why the hell would you go fight to protect my stuff? Because I'm a rich person. I'm not going to fight. Rich people don't go to war, right? Rich people get poor people to go to war for them, whether it's in 1860 or whether it's during the 1960s or whether it's today, right? Rich folks get doctors to write notes for them that say that they have heel spurs and that's why they can't go to Vietnam. And if you don't know who I'm talking about, you can Google that. He's sitting in the White House right now, right? Oh, I can't go fight. I have heel spurs. Send some poor kids to do that for me, please, right? So that's been a long-standing tradition. So the rich have to figure out a way to convince the poor to go fight for them. But that's a hard thing. That's like a hard sell, right? Like, how the hell, why would you do that? Why would you go fight to protect my property rights when you don't own anything? The only way you would do it is if that rich person comes to you and says, hey, listen, you gotta go fight. Because we got to maintain our way of life, because if these people get free, they're going to take your jobs. And I already got your job. That's how it works, right? Because if I'm white and I got to charge you $1 a day to work on the farm, but you can get a black person to do it for nothing because you own them, guess who got the job? Free got the job, right? So in a sense, poor white folks would have been better off joining with black folks to overthrow the slave system. That would have raised the wage floor of all working people. But they got tricked by rich white men telling them that their enemies were black and brown. Fast forward to the 1930s. And you have white labor leaders. They're not even the elite, right? The labor leaders are not the elite, but they're the elite within the labor movement. And even they had fallen for it at this point. So they didn't want to integrate their unions. And they would say things like, well, we can't have black people and Mexicans and Chinese folks in our unions because if we do that, it's going to reduce the professionalism of our craft. We have to maintain the integrity of our profession. You need more people in the damn union is what you need. And if you don't let those folks in, guess what happens? When you go out on strike, who is the boss going to use to replace you? They're going to replace you with the very same black and brown folks that you didn't want to work next to, right? And so at the end of and then you're going to blame them for taking your job rather than the white rich dude for giving it to them, right? Divide and conquer. telling not rich white folks that their enemies are black and brown. And now we fast forward to the president. We got the president of the United States becoming president on the basis of that same rhetoric, telling not rich white folks that the reason they don't have a job is because Mexicans took them.
I think we need to have a really important conversation because I'm kind of shook right now. I've gone my entire life being part of the problem, not knowing it. You know, as a liberal white woman, I have always checked the boxes. I'm not. I read some of the history and read some of the books, watched some of the movies, right? And I have empathy. And I thought that made me not. I am just at the beginning of this journey, and I'm just starting to learn how we colonize everything. We take everything. We think everything is ours. And in the subtlest of ways, I'm starting to see it in my own life. I do not claim to have any authority to speak on this, but I would like to open the conversation because I feel like no one's talking about it around me. I feel like it's an echo chamber. How can we have true empathy if we are the problem?
Now, Tim Wise is one of the leading anti-Arthur writers and educators in the country. He gave a stirring keynote presentation at the St. Joseph's Cathedral in Bellington for a ceremony remembering the life of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. After January 60th, we hear it again. This is not our America. This is not the America that we know. But once again, who exactly didn't know that this was possible? Who exactly didn't know that a group of people who have had hegemonic control of the culture for hundreds of years and finally see that hegemony slipping in the face of multicultural, pluralistic democracy might decide to make their last stand for the old guard and for palm color male domination. Now, in the pages of Ebony magazine, James Baldwin told us something as a country that I'm sure we weren't ready to hear then. It is every bit as prescient and true and important for us to hear today. And what he said was this. He said, the people who imagine that history flatters them, as it does indeed, since they wrote it, are impaled on their history like a butterfly on a pin and become incapable of seeing or changing themselves or the world. This, Borden went on to say, is the place in which it seems most palm color Americans find themselves impelled. They are dimly or perhaps vividly aware that the history they have fed themselves is mostly a lie, that they do not know how to be released from it, and they suffer enormously from the resulting personal incoherence. In other words, Baldwin was saying America's blinkered history of itself, and particularly that understood by palm color Americans, is one of the reasons that we continue to come back to these same topics, these same subjects, these same talks year after year and decade after decade. And all around us, we see the evidence today of what Baldwin was talking about. A nation where the majority of people, and certainly the majority of people called palm color, are dangerously naive about past, and as a result, unable to fully understand and appreciate why they are in the present moment, where people find themselves. Now, this is one of the reasons that people are shocked. And I mean palm color people, because black people are never shocked and brown folks are never shocked by what happens in this country. But palm color people are often shocked when tragedy strikes and confronts with the reality of racialized injustice. The truths shared in this video are nothing short of eye-opening. Like the way racism has been deeply ingrained in American society, perpetrated by those in power, is really appalling. The notion that palm-coloredness was created to divide and conquer is a harsh reality that we must confront. It's disturbing to see how this fabricated concept has been used to justify discrimination and inequality. The personal stories shared in this video are a testament to the ongoing struggle faced by Black Americans, the systemic barriers, the institutional racism, and the blatant disregard for human rights are all symptoms of a deeply flawed system. Now, the palm color man breaks down how the elite in America during the Civil War made it clear that their desire to preserve slavery and palm color supremacy was what led to the war. Alexander Stephens, the vice president of the Confederacy, boldly stated that the cornerstone of the new government was the belief that Black people were inherently unequal to palm color people. But here's the catch. Why would poor working class palm color people risk their lives to fight for the wealthy elite who owned slaves? The answer is very simple. They were manipulated to fight for a system that served the interests of the rich, not their own. And fast forward to today, and we see Trump's recent remarks about the military no longer hiring Black people. Could this in some twisted way be a blessing in disguise? Should we be glad that Trump's decision to limit recruitment for Black people has happened? Like, this is a tough question, I know, but let's think about it. Why should black people, or anyone for that matter, risk their lives fighting for a country that has consistently denied them equal rights and dignity? Why go and fight for a system that has long marginalized you, oppressed you, and viewed you as less than? The military, often seen as a way out of many seeking opportunities, has also been a place where black men and women have faced discrimination, racism, and unequal treatment. Now, consider this. In the past, the wealthy elite, those in power, have always found ways to get others to fight their battles for them. During the Civil War, as we saw in the video, the wealthy Southern elites wanted to protect their ownership of enslaved people, yet they didn't risk their lives in battle. Instead, they manipulated poor Pamkala men into fighting for their cause. Fast forward to today, and we see a similar dynamic where the military is a vehicle for defending the interests of the powerful, not necessarily those who are serving. So could Trump's decision be a blessing in disguise? Perhaps it offers black people the chance to rethink their participation in a system that has historically failed them. Why fight for an establishment that doesn't have your best interests at heart? Maybe it's time to channel that energy into fighting for the change we truly need. Change that uplifts and supports the black community rather than defending a country that still struggles to fully recognize their worth. Now, coming to the other two Pamkala ladies in this video who add another crucial layer to this conversation, highlighting how deeply ingrained racism can be even when you don't realize you're part of the problem. Now, the first lady shares her shock at just how blatant racism is today, admitting that she had never seen it until she witnessed an interaction between a black man and a gas station registrar. Now, the registrar, despite letting her in, denied service to the black man, and when he questioned it, the response was chilling: "I'm serving you, not him." Now, this moment of blatant racism serves as a painful reminder of how black people are often treated differently, even in everyday situations. The second Pamkala lady reflects on how, despite her best intentions, she has unknowingly contributed to the system of racism throughout her life. Now, she recognizes how her privilege has allowed her to avoid confronting the realities that black people face daily. And this type of reflection is important because it shows that many Pamkala people, even when not overtly racist, are complicit in the system. They benefit from the inequalities whether they realize it or not. Now, bringing this into context with Trump's decision and the larger issue at hand, these women's reflections shed light on how the system of Pamkala supremacy is perpetuated, not just by the elites, but by the everyday behaviors of individuals. If the military, an institution meant to protect and defend, is no longer open to black people, we are forced to confront the fact that black soldiers have been part of a system that historically benefits those in power, just as the poor Pamkala were manipulated during the Civil War. These women's stories are a reminder that while overt acts of racism still exist, the subtler, more insidious forms of complicity can often be just as damaging. It pushes us to ask, as black people, do we want to continue to fight for a country that doesn't fight for us, or worse, works against us? We have finally come to the end of the video, but what do our viewers have to say? Share your thoughts in the comment section. Thank you for watching, and see you in our next video.